10 German surnames moved through Argentina in the years after the Second World War, and in most cases, the surname itself was the least important part of the disguise. What mattered was the paperwork behind it, a passport from a humanitarian agency that was never meant to shelter a killer, a landing permit stamped by a government that had decided not to ask questions, and in the most notorious cases, a brand new identity manufactured specifically to make sure no one ever connected the name on the door to the name on a war crimes indictment. 10 names, 10 methods of disappearing. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly how a country of 40 million people became the last address for some of the 20th century's worst crimes. Stay until number 1, because that case is not a story about hiding at all. He lived under his own name for 50 years, running a small business in a mountain town, and almost no one asked. Number 10. Fuldner. Carlos Fuldner was not a fugitive. He was Argentine by birth, of German descent, and he had served as a captain in the SS during the war. After 1945, he went home to Buenos Aires and built the machine that made everything else on this list possible. Operating out of an immigration office in Madrid and then Rome, under a government commission, Fuldner processed landing permits and Red Cross travel documents for former SS men, arranging entry under invented names before they ever set foot on a ship. His office is estimated to have processed roughly 300 SS arrivals a year between 1947 and 1951. He later put one of his own clients to work at his hydroelectric construction company, a quiet engineering job for a man named Ricardo Clement. The surname Fuldner does not appear on any wanted poster. It appears on the paperwork of almost everyone else's. The next name belonged to a bishop, and the document his office produced was the single most valuable object a fleeing war criminal could carry. Number 9. Hudal. Alois Hudal was an Austrian bishop based in Rome, rector of a German-Austrian church, and by his own later admission, a man who saw post-war Nazi refugees as innocent victims of persecution. His office issued identity papers through the Vatican's refugee relief apparatus, not full passports, but the essential first document, the one that let a man with no legitimate history apply to the International Red Cross for a displaced person passport, which in turn unlocked a visa. Historians have linked Hudal's network to Eduard Roschmann, known as the Butcher of Riga, to Franz Stangl, Commandant of Treblinka, to Gustav Wagner of Sobibor, and, most infamously, to both Adolf Eichmann and Josef Mengele. A Vatican official later admitted the Pope had provided money for the operation, in small amounts, but that it had come. The surname Hudal is attached to a stamp, not a hideout, the seal that turned a wanted man into a paper refugee. Number 8 arrived in Argentina under an alias for one specific reason. Unlike almost anyone else on this list, everyone already knew his name. Number 8. Clement. This was the identity Adolf Eichmann built for himself, over years, in careful stages. Captured at war's end by American troops who did not realize who he was, he first called himself Otto Eckmann, then escaped custody, and lived under a second borrowed name, Otto Henninger, in the British occupation zone. In 1950, with help from the Ratline network, he sailed from Italy to Argentina under a newly minted identity, Ricardo Clement. He settled in Buenos Aires, worked for years as a foreman at the Mercedes-Benz plant, and lived quietly with his family for a decade. It ended on the 25th of March 1960, when Mossad agents surveilling his house confirmed his silver wedding anniversary matched Eichmann's exactly. On the 11th of May, he was seized on the street steps from his home, held for 9 days in a rented villa, and flown to Israel to stand trial. Argentina formally protested the operation as a violation of its sovereignty. 40 years later, its government issued an apology instead. The name that comes next did not need the same level of invention. He simply borrowed someone else's papers, twice, before landing on the one that stuck. Number 7. Gregor. Josef Mengele, the Auschwitz physician known as the Angel of Death, spent his early post-war years hiding under the name Fritz Hollmann, while his real name was read aloud daily at the Nuremberg trials. In 1949, he crossed to Argentina on an Italian passport under the alias Helmut Gregor, and used it to obtain an official immigrant identity card the following year. Declassified Argentine files, released only in the past year, show that authorities knew exactly who Gregor really was. He had been listed under his true name as a member of a local SS social club, even while carrying Gregor's papers. By 1956, he felt safe enough to request his own birth certificate from the West German embassy and formally reclaim his real name on his identity documents. He lived in Argentina for roughly a decade before growing extradition pressure sent him first to Paraguay, then to Brazil, where he died in 1979, having never faced trial. Before we continue, if you are finding this useful, subscribe to Origins Decoded. Every week we uncover the history hidden inside surnames, bloodlines, and family names from across the world. Hit subscribe so you never miss one. The next case did not require an alias at all, which is in some ways the most damning entry on this list. Number 6. Schwamberger. Josef Schwamberger commanded forced labor camps in occupied Poland and was directly implicated in mass killings there. He reached Argentina through the same post-war channels as the others, and then simply lived under his own, real, unaltered name from 1948 until 1990, more than 4 decades, without serious interference from the Argentine state. He was finally extradited to Germany in 1990 and convicted there of murder. His case is often cited by historians as the clearest evidence that concealment was never really the point. The point was that no one with the power to look was looking. Number 5 carries a name attached to one of the deadliest technologies of the entire war, and it followed him to 2 continents. Number 5. Rauff. Walter Rauff had overseen the development and deployment of mobile gas vans, used to kill an estimated 100,000 people in occupied Russia and Belarus. Bishop Hudal's network moved him first to Damascus, then on to Chile, where, much like Schwamberger, he eventually lived under his own name, running an ordinary life until his death in 1984. West Germany sought his extradition for years. Chile refused. He was never tried. Number 4 is the name of a man who traded the anonymity of a big city for something stranger, 50 years behind the counter of a delicatessen in a small Andean tourist town. Number 4. Priebke. Erich Priebke had personally taken part in the shooting of over 300 civilians at the Ardeatine Caves outside Rome in March 1944, in reprisal for a partisan attack. Hudal moved him to Bariloche, a Patagonian town so associated with German immigration that its alpine architecture still draws tourists today. There, under his own name, Priebke ran a delicatessen for close to 50 years, a known and by some accounts well-liked figure in the community, until an American television investigation identified him in 1994. He was extradited to Italy and eventually convicted for his role in the massacre, dying under house arrest in Rome in 2013 at the age of 100. Number 3 belonged to a Franciscan priest whose ratline ran in parallel to the Vatican's official one, and whose clientele came from a different, equally brutal chapter of the war. Number 3. Draganović. Krunoslav Draganović was a Croatian priest who had served as a chaplain to the wartime Ustaša regime, the fascist movement responsible for mass killings of Serbs, Jews, and Roma at the Jasenovac camp complex. Operating out of a Croatian college near Rome's Piazza Cavour, his network moved Ustaše officials and collaborators onward to South America, using the same forged Red Cross documents as the Hudal pipeline. He was, in a strange postscript, later recruited by American intelligence during the early Cold War for his knowledge of Balkan networks, and eventually died in communist Yugoslavia in 1983 with formal immunity. His name attaches to a second, parallel highway out of Europe that ran through the same institutions as the first. Number 2 is a red flag that appeared on manifests for years before anyone acted on it, and its meaning could not have been plainer. Number 2. Feischmann. When Mossad agents in Buenos Aires were trying to confirm that Ricardo Clement was really Eichmann, One detail nearly gave the whole operation away years earlier than it needed to. The house on Garibaldi Street had been purchased under the name Veronica Caterina Liebel de Fichman, a single letter removed from the real surname of Eichmann's actual wife. The alias had barely bothered to disguise itself. It is a small detail, but it captures something true about this entire network. After a certain point, the concealment was not really designed to survive close scrutiny. It was designed to survive the fact that almost no one was scrutinizing at all. And now, number 1. This is not a story about hiding. It is the opposite, a case that shows exactly how thin the concealment in this entire network really was, because the Argentine state kept a complete paper trail on him the entire time. Number 1. The declassified Mengele files themselves. In the past 2 years, Argentina's government has opened its own archives on this era. Surveillance reports, immigration ledgers, photographs, internal police correspondence, and the binder on Mengele alone runs to hundreds of pages. It documents his false Italian passport, his real name surfacing in SS social records, his eventual official identity card issued under his own birth certificate, and testimony from an Auschwitz survivor describing, in his own words, what Mengele had done to children in the camp. The files show, in the plainest bureaucratic language, that the Argentine state knew who these men were for years and chose inaction. In February 2025, the Argentine president ordered these archives opened to outside researchers. As one of the officials involved put it, the material would be instrumental in finally holding accountable everyone who financed or facilitated the network, not only the men who fled, but the institutions that let them stay, found and untouched for decades. 10 names, 10 methods, 10 corridors leading back through a Vatican refugee office, a government immigration desk in Madrid and Rome, a Red Cross document meant for the innocent and used for the guilty, and a country that, by its own later admission, simply decided not to look. Some of these men built new names from nothing. Others never bothered to change their own. Both worked, for years, because the concealment was never really about the surname. It was about which governments and institutions chose silence. If you know a family history that touches this era, or if your own research has turned up something in these newly opened archives, say so in the comments, because this history is still being written, right now, in files that were sealed until last year. If you made it to the end of this video, subscribe to Origins Decoded. Every week we go deeper into the history hidden inside the names people carry without knowing what they mean. The next video is already waiting for you.